Good afternoon from sunny Arrowhead Stadium. Welcome to SportsBeat Live. This is a show where we discuss Chiefs with the folks in the media who know them best and with you. Send us your questions and comments, and let's talk about the Super Bowl bound Kansas City Chiefs with Jesse Newell, Herbie Teope, and Sam McDowell. Great to see you guys. We're all posted up somewhere in the Arrowhead Stadium press box. It's a pretty lengthy press box. I hope hope everybody found a good spot to speak from. So let's get right to it. Chiefs, Philadelphia Eagles, a week from Sunday, Super Bowl 57. Today was the first day that we had an opportunity to talk to Andy Reid, Patrick Mahomes, and other players since the AFC Championship game victory over the Cincinnati Bengals. We were all curious about the health of these Chiefs, and we got some answers today and some observations at practice. So, Herbie, why don't you take us through what you saw? Let's go through what Andy Reid said first about the injury list, and then we'll talk about some conditions of these injuries and what it may mean for the Chiefs. But let's go down the list. Let's start with the guys who left the game on Sunday and what their status is.
Yeah, you had 5 players who left the game. You had L'Jarius Sneed with a concussion, McCole Hardman, who aggravated that pelvis injury, Juju Smith-Schuster with the knee injury, Kadarius Toney with an ankle/hamstring injury, and also linebacker Willie Gay with a shoulder injury. Of those 5, 4 did not practice today. Sneed still in the concussion protocol. Kadarius Toney and Juju Smith-Schuster were observed on the practice field watching from the sidelines. Sneed, surprisingly, also was observed on the practice field towards the end of it. He was going through stretching and conditioning, a good sign that he is progressing well in that 5-step concussion protocol. The big one, though, is at this point is McCole Hardman. The pelvis injury. I asked Andy Reid specifically, how challenging will it be for him to return in time for the Super Bowl? Andy Reid essentially said, look, I think it's doubtful. I don't think he's going to play. So Chiefs are going to prepare going forward without McCole Hardman.
I was kind of surprised he played anyway in the AFC title game. I didn't know what the chances were, but I thought we had seen him for the last time a couple of months ago. He really did give it a shot, and it was on the play in the third quarter when Mahomes rolled left and completed what was about an 11-yard pass to Hardman, that Hardman went down, aggravating that abdomen injury. And that was when Patrick Mahomes came up as gimpy as we've seen him at all during that game. He was limping pretty noticeably. And I believe he said, or I heard someone who in a position to know after the game say that because the game stopped and then they had to tend to Hardman, that actually gave a couple extra minutes for Mahomes to gather himself and to rest that ankle for just a couple of minutes. All right, so let's transition to that. Mahomes with the ankle injury. Jesse, what did we know? What did we learn about that today? With Mahomes played on the high ankle sprain and performed admirably, of course. So we're all curious about where things stand with him and the ankle. What was the update from him?
Yeah, he was asked about that pretty early today, as you'd expect, and he just said he basically had general soreness from the game. It was a kind of a physical game to go through, especially that last hit that he took. And you mentioned earlier, Blair, the one that hit that he kind of had to shake off earlier in the game. But he basically said his whole body was a little bit sore. He didn't feel like the ankle took a step backwards, so no aggravation in any regard with that, but just sort of was sore after this particular game. So it feels like he's in a good spot for moving ahead for the Super Bowl. And as we know, I mean, if he performs anywhere close to what he did on Sunday here in 2 weeks, then I think Chiefs fans will be happy with potentially what they're going to get out of him, because at times he didn't look hurt at all. And when he really, really, really needed to push down the throttle and get first downs or scramble, we saw him be able to do that. And you would assume there's going to be 1 or 2 of those moments in the Super Bowl where he's going to do the same sort of thing. So get that rest for him. Obviously, with the couple weeks off, he'll be able to do that. But it doesn't sound like a step back with the ankle, just a general soreness after this game, and it was a physical one against the Bengals.
Speaking of running for first downs, of course, that's what Mahomes did on the final offensive snap for the Chiefs and picked up a first down, but not enough really to try a field goal from that distance until Joseph Asai pushed him when he was out of bounds and got the 15-yard penalty. And that, of course, gave Harrison Butker the yardage he needed to get the 45-yard field goal. So, Sam, Mahomes addressed that today, and John Gordon asks, he was talking about the conspiracy theories on the refs. That's one of them, right? That's some of the chatter we've been hearing in Kansas City this week, and certainly social media has gone crazy with the theories about this, that it's a call that should not have been made. But I thought it was a really smart answer from Mahomes on, did he try to sell the call? And my interpretation of the answer was he was in no position to sell it. He did nothing that he would not have done out of the ordinary, is the way I interpreted it. What do you think?
Yeah, Bengals fans are down bad, right? I mean, if this is the call that they're pointing to, I mean, it's an easy call. I mean, Patrick Mahomes said it was the furthest he thinks he's been hit out of bounds. He had to roll. I think you see a lot of players roll because of all the traffic there on the sideline, but him in particular was something we talked a lot about last week. He was going to have most trouble stopping on that ankle, and so he didn't want to plant that ankle hard in the ground to try and stop his momentum there, and elected to roll instead. So I mean, yeah, it might look like he's trying to sell the call, but frankly, that's irrelevant. It's not a call he should have to sell. It was very obvious that he got hit late. The important thing moving forward is knowing that Patrick Mahomes is going to have to move around a lot more than he did against the Bengals because of the opponent he's facing. The Eagles have 15 more sacks than any other team in the NFL. The Chiefs are second on that list, I think, with 55. Eagles had 70 sacks this year. They have 4 guys who had at least 11 sacks this season. Every metric you look at, Football Outsiders has their pass rush just far and away number one. And I think that the Bengals are, in like the bottom 5 on that same list. So I had written earlier this last week that I thought the Bengals were a good opponent to play, given the circumstances that Patrick Mahomes was going to have to throw from the pocket more. This is not really the best opponent to play when you're limited on that ankle injury. And the question is whether, and this is what Jesse touched on already, but usually 3 weeks out from a high ankle sprain, you might be able to get through some stuff, because usually it's about a 4 to 6 week injury. And now you're getting closer to being healthy at 3 weeks. But Patrick Mahomes went through a full NFL tackle football game after 7 days. It's a little bit different. And he did say today that he was sore, but he didn't think he had any setbacks. But he also didn't spend Sunday rehabbing, getting treatment, and healing the ankle. He put it through, as much torment as he possibly could have, to be frank. So that's what I wonder. Are we going to get Patrick Mahomes 3 weeks removed from an ankle injury, or are we really only getting him 2 weeks removed from this high ankle sprain?
With all those sacks, where do the Eagles rank as far as a blitzing team concerned? So did they blitz often? NFC team, we're not as familiar with them as we are the teams in the AFC.
Yeah, I'll get that to you, Blair.
I'm just curious. That is an incredible amount of sacks, and to have 4 in double digits, that's quite amazing. It really is hard to take a lot away from the Eagles' victory over the 49ers in the NFC title game. It was 31-7 or 38-7. I can't remember the final, but they blitzed the Giants the week before and then handled the 49ers so easily. They're clearly on a roll here. Meanwhile, the Chiefs win 2 one-possession games and sweat bullets to beat the Cincinnati Bengals. So let's while Sam is looking that up, how do we interpret that, Herbie? One team comes into this with 2 narrow victories. The other one comes in, having breezed through their 2 games in the playoffs. But you know what? I'll take a first stab at it and say I remember the 49ers 4 years ago came in with 2 easy wins in their playoff games and then came in and lost to the Chiefs. So, but from a confidence standpoint, should it matter? Does it matter?
Yeah, it's kind of hard. That's a fair question, but I don't know how much you can take out of the 49ers losing to the Eagles, because they were down to Brock Purdy, and then Purdy got hurt. They were down to like their 5th quarterback, and then he got hurt, and then Purdy had to go back into the game. If anything, the Eagles beat the team they were supposed to beat. Are they on a roll? Absolutely. They've been on a roll all season. So, of course they're going to be confident. Jalen Hurts was neck and neck with Patrick Mahomes for the MVP award until he got hurt towards the end of the season with the shoulder injury. This is a good football team. I hate to sound like Andy Reid, but he's right. It's a good football team, and they should look forward to the challenge of playing the Philadelphia Eagles.
Yeah, I see some discussion. Matt has this about, and it's not wrong, that the Eagles have had the weaker teams to play in here. I kind of feel like this is going back to the old Gonzaga discussion with college basketball. Like, can Gonzaga be any good while playing in the West Coast Conference? And the answer is, of course, yes. I mean, if LeBron James is playing for your high school team, he'd still be LeBron James. He'd still be a really good basketball player. That doesn't really impact the type of person or player that you are. But I always go back to the line on this. I mean, it seems like both of these teams were, the dominant teams in their conference for most of the year, or at least got the 1 seeds. The Chiefs and Bills in the AFC were kind of the top 2, whereas the Eagles kind of sailed their way through the NFC. But the line's at 1.5. It's been moving between pick 'em and 1 and 1.5 both ways. So this is a really even matchup. And I hate to go this way, but it is sort of pick your narrative, right? Like, it's the Chiefs having a tougher matchup. Does that make them more battle tested? The Eagles not having as many injuries and not being as tested, does that make them more rested? I mean, Blair, you gave the example of the 49ers a few years ago. I gave you the example of the Chiefs last year, who they went through the Bills and had that emotional, crazy victory where they got beat up. The next week came out kind of flat against the Bengals and weren't able to advance to the Super Bowl. So it is sort of like pick your narrative here, depending on who you are. But the bottom line is what Vegas says to me. And the Vegas says that this is going to be one of the closest Super Bowls, or at least going into it, is one of the closest Super Bowls that we've had in recent memory. So that's what makes it a great game. And I think what does impact it too is just that small thing we were talking about earlier, which is Patrick Mahomes, how's his ankle? Juju Smith-Schuster, how's his knee? Kadarius Toney, how's his ankle? Willie Gay, is he going to be fine? All these guys that are just, maybe it's a half point, maybe it's a quarter of a point. You add all those up, and all of a sudden, a game that's kind of a pick 'em or pretty close, you might swing it to Eagles 1 or Eagles 2, that sort of thing. So that's kind of where these two teams stand. The fact that the Eagles probably are just a tiny bit healthier than the Chiefs is going to play into this game, and we'll see over these 2 weeks. If the Chiefs get healthier, then maybe this thing swings back to a true pick 'em.
Yeah, the Eagles are a little bit tough to figure out because all of their numbers are really good. They have the best defense in the NFL, in particular the best pass defense in the NFL. It's not just the pass rush. They have 3 guys who can play cornerback. 2 of them have been rated in the top 20 to 25 on Pro Football Focus all year, and they got a 3rd guy back with Maddox last week. So I think all their personnel suggests they're really good. When you look at their schedule, and I got this from Pro Football Focus a couple days ago, but their 4 best offenses they faced this year are the one time they played the Cowboys with Dak Prescott, the Packers, the Jaguars, and the Lions. Those are the 4 best statistical offense that the Eagles defense has faced this year. They all had 30 points against them. So there's splits against the good teams versus the bad teams. Now everybody should be better against the bad teams and worse against the good teams, but their splits are pretty exaggerated. And obviously the Chiefs is the best offense that the Eagles are going to face all year. They finished first in points and yards this year. So like I said at the top of this, it's a little difficult to figure out how good are the Eagles defense. And I mean, what better test they have, and what better time to have that test in the Super Bowl next weekend against the Chiefs.
Yeah, Sam, I just go big picture on this. This is sort of what we talk about analytically. Like, what is the one thing I was talking about, the trump card in football? What's the trump card in football? It's a passing offense, right? And the Chiefs have a quarterback. They have Andy Reid. They have the offense to go with it. That's sort of what that indicates to me, which is like the Eagles have a defense that if you don't have a really good pass offense, they're pretty good. If you have a good pass offense, that's the trump card. It can beat you no matter what. So that's sort of why we're still talking about Patrick Mahomes' injury. How mobile is he going to be? Is he going to be good in 2 weeks? Because the Chiefs have proven over the course of the season, like, think about the best defenses they faced. Like Tampa Bay going into that one, a feared defense, went up and put a ton of points on them. San Francisco, play at San Francisco. we're going to put a ton of points up on them. The Chiefs, when they're playing well and you have a good defense, the Chiefs win. It's the trump card. It goes on top of that. So that's kind of probably where the Eagles are facing right now, is that they feel good about their defense. They like their personnel. They have a quarterback on his rookie contract, so you can sprinkle throughout the rest of the roster a lot of this money. But right now with the Chiefs, they have the quarterback, which overrides everything else. It's like the Uno card or whatever. Like that goes on top of everything else. And Patrick Mahomes is the ultimate. When he's playing well, he can overcome all that. Now, is he going to play well? Or does he have enough weapons, even, with the limited ones he has or had available to him last week? They were able to make the plays. Does he have enough this week to be able to go over the top of this Philadelphia defense, which by all indications is good, but still not good enough to beat a passing offense? That's kind of the one unstoppable force in the NFL.
I like Super Bowls where the teams did not meet in the regular season. 2 years ago, the Chiefs played the Bucs in a rematch, second time in Tampa that year, and obviously didn't go well for the Chiefs. By the way, the Chiefs were, I think, started that game as a 1.5 point favorite, and then fell flat early and had all kinds of problems. We know what happened in Super Bowl 55. Another thing I find interesting is this year, the way the schedules worked out, both the Chiefs and the Eagles played the AFC South. So there are some common opponents here, and relatively, the Eagles swept their games. The Chiefs went 3-1, losing to the Colts, but the Eagles only beat the Colts by a point. So they played evenly in the games in which they had common opponents. So no clues there. Jesse, I do like that point about what the Chiefs did against good defenses this year. Maybe the two of the top 3 or 4 defenses they played, they shredded, and I absolutely agree with that. That if you find when the Chiefs go against a top-notch defense, they tend to succeed. Where they haven't succeeded, obviously, is in teams, against teams that can run the ball effectively, control the clock, control possessions, and that is something the Eagles can do pretty well, Herbie, isn't it?
Yeah, you got a running back over there with more than 1,000 yards rushing this past season, Miles Sanders. And to Jesse's point, I do agree with they were able to punch a good defense in the mouth, but the difference between those defenses and the Eagles have offensive firepower. Against the Buccaneers, you're facing clearly beyond his prime Tom Brady with one weapon, and they had zero semblance of a run game. With the 49ers, you had Jimmy Garoppolo and all the things that come with him, and no running game. That was Christian McCaffrey's first game in the 49ers uniform. Now you've got 2 quality wide receivers, an all-pro wide receiver, A.J. Brown, and that other wide receiver, Smith, with also, you got 2 1,000-yard receivers. This Eagles team can go up and down the field. Jalen Hurts led the NFC with 35 total touchdowns. So, you got to be careful with this team as well.
One thing we can talk about as we get into next week, and we'll have a few of these shows next week from Phoenix, is the Chiefs winning the way that they did on Sunday. How they poured so much into that game, so much emotion, and then the injuries and Mahomes playing hurt, and Travis Kelce is back locking up on Friday, and him, we sat up here in the press box 2 hours before the game and actually watched him, run some routes with Rick Burkholder watching him, just to be sure that he would play. And Jesse often refers to college basketball as a comp, and I'll do that too here. We hear about it all the time. Coaches say that, if you have an injury to a key player, there's a rally around factor that usually is good for a game. And, you kind of play above your heads to compensate for a loss. Now, I'm not suggesting there's a loss here, but just the whole emotional aspect that the Chiefs poured into the AFC title game that the Eagles didn't have to do in either one of their playoff games, to be honest with you. Those games were over early, and they were on cruise control for 2 straight games, and the Chiefs were playing with their hair on fire for 2 playoff games, especially the second one. I don't know if that's a factor or not, but it's something that I've thought about, and I thought about it again today when we were listening to Andy Reid and Patrick Mahomes Mahomes, Frank, and Nick Bolton. It seemed like a low energy press conference today. It just did. I can't put my finger on why, but it just seemed a little low energy. So, all right, Jesse, I'll ask you, the basketball guy. Is there something to the old rally around for a game and then it catches up to you?
Yeah, I would just go back to what I said earlier. It's like sort of like pick your narrative. I mean, this is the opposite of what you said earlier, Blair. This is the Chiefs against the Bills last year, and they used up everything they had for the 13-second game. They were crazy high off that victory, and then the next week couldn't get it done and get to the Super Bowl. So if you want to be worried about that, you can be. If you want to be happy the Chiefs have played close games and have been challenged, you can be happy about that. I think the bottom line with this is, I talked with Sam about this because it's an old Cardinals guy, and I know he's followed the Cardinals growing up. But I just remember I had World Series tickets to the Astros here in 2005 if they made it, and I was at the College Rec Center watching Game 5 of the World Series, and the Astros were 1 out away from making the World Series. I thought, man, I'm going to be able to go here. And Albert Pujols hit one on the train tracks at old Enron Field, and it was a shot, one of the biggest homers I've ever seen. And like Brad Lidge almost crumpled into the fetal position on the mound. And I'm like, there's no way I'm going now because the Astros are going to lose this game. They're going to lose the next two. They're not going to make the World Series. Sure enough, the next game, the Astros won pretty easily and went to the World Series. So sometimes we kind of talk ourselves to death on these pregame narratives and what could happen and what might happen. I mean, the bottom line is, we've seen games from the Chiefs. We felt really good about them going into the Indianapolis game, winning that game, maybe dominating that game, and then Sky Moore drops a fumble. And that game was never the same after that. So small things early in the game can change it up. That's why we watch sports. That's why they are so fascinating to us. But at this point, you sort of are kind of looking at the prism you want to. I mean, are the Chiefs battle tested? Yeah. Is that going to help them? Maybe. Are they a little bit more injured than they'd like? Sure. But what's going to happen in this particular game? At this point, we're all just sort of speculating until we know who's going to be on the field and potentially how this thing is going to swing once that first ball is kicked off.
I do think there's something to be said for running out of gas, particularly in the NFL when it's just the most physically demanding sport we have, right? I think the Chiefs will have two things working in their advantage here, possibly three if you include the bye. They've got time to sort of regroup is one. But the two primary things I would say are the opponent, I think, is going to work in their favor here. There's a lot of emotional attachment to this particular opponent that necessitates focus. We're all asking about – Herbie asked today about there being two black quarterbacks. Blair, you asked today about there being two Big 12 quarterbacks. Dave Scretta asked about the first time it's two quarterbacks from Texas. We've all asked Andy Reid about the Philadelphia ties. Nick Sirianni is going to get asked about the same thing. There's people in the front office here who worked with Nick Sirianni. I mean, there is just a ton of reasons to focus on Philadelphia this week rather than focusing on the last week in Cincinnati. And the primary thing I think is going to help the Chiefs in this cause is they've been here and lost this game before. I think it would be different if we're talking about a team that was 2 for 2 in their Super Bowl appearances. If they had beaten Tampa Bay and beaten San Francisco, and now they waltz into this game against Philadelphia, I think this would be a bigger storyline. Because Patrick Mahomes particular has lost this game, I just don't see any issue with him turning the focus from Cincinnati to Philadelphia in a week.
I like that thought. I also like the idea. I thought the Chiefs' offensive line played really well against Cincinnati, and good sign. Everybody on the line appears healthy, and against a Philadelphia team that gets to the quarterback, that's going to be essential. Chiefs, Jerick McKinnon and even Pacheco lately has been doing a great job of in pass pro, and I do think that they'll be determined to keep Mahomes as safe as they did against the Bengals for the most part. Okay, as we begin to wind down, let me bring up one other aspect of this game that we know about already, and that is the referee. We know who's calling this game. And Herbie, tell us how it works. How does Carl Cheffers get selected to be the referee for this game? And remind us, it's not his crew calling it. It's basically an all-star crew. Am I right?
Yeah, it's an all-star crew, and you're asking me to tell you how it works after I saw Carl Cheffers get in this game. I have no idea how it works. Essentially, though, in all seriousness, it's a grading system, and at the end of the year, the NFL officiating whatever their organization gets with the NFL, and they compilate the grades, they compile the grades. I mean, and they say, okay, this player, or excuse me, this ref will work this game, this ref will work that game, and it's an all-star crew. But you asked the question how he got it. That's all I got for you.
It's the highest graded. It means he's the highest graded white hat of the year. So, look, I really hope we're not talking about the referees after the game. But I think it is legitimate to talk about this particular referee. And Blair, you, Jesse, and I already had this conversation amongst ourselves because we were interested in it. But to me, it's not that Carl Cheffers has had some bad games with the Chiefs in particular, some bad calls against the Chiefs. That's really not my concern going into the game. My concern is that he leads crews that annually lead the league in penalties every year, and it slows down the game. And while it's not his crew going to the Super Bowl, he is the man in charge of the crew. And I think we all thought going into the 2020 Super Bowl in Tampa Bay that same thought. It's just him. It's not his entire crew. But Blair, you mentioned it. That crew set an NFL record for penalties thrown in the first half. And Jesse and I went to the game in Houston this year, and there were two instances as bad. First of all, I'd mentioned this, but there were players in the locker room after the game that were asking me about calls made in the Houston game because they were like, what did the replay show on that? I didn't think I got the guy. And specifically defensive holding and DPI calls, which Carl Cheffers' crew leads the league in those calls. And the two worst calls, despite all of that conversation, or worst instances for the referees, there were flags thrown, extended huddles to where Jesse and I are in the press box going, what is the conversation here? Somebody threw a flag. Why'd you throw it? What's the conversation here? He just came on the mic and said, well, no flag on the play. No explanation for why. And I think that's a disservice to the fans. And regardless of what crew he's got, that is the person running the crew. And like I said, I worry about the pace of the game. I worry about the clarity of the calls within the game, even if it's not his crew, because it is still him.
Yeah, we spent some time earlier in the show talking about, sort of making fun of Bengals, fans with their complaining about the officiating in the AFC title game. And listen, it's what fans do. It's what, but there is there is a reason to talk about this before the game and to be open to the to this, just to the idea that the person calling the game has had the Chiefs a couple times this year. I think it was the Raiders game at Arrowhead too, was it not?
Yeah, he made the Chris Jones roughing the passer call on the fumble towards the end of the half, and then he had the Houston game this year, which the Raiders call, I think, is perhaps the worst call we've seen against the Chiefs this year. The Houston game, I think, is just overall the worst officiated game we've seen involving the Chiefs this year.
So the Chiefs got that going for them as Super Bowl 57 approaches. Okay, hey, we're going to wrap it up here. We've got so much more to discuss, and we will do that next week from Phoenix. I think even Monday. Heads up! I think on Monday we're going to come to you live, and then a couple other days from the Valley of the Sun as well. And Jesse Newell, Herbie Teope, and Sam McDowell, along with Vahe Gregorian, will all be there. And George Howard produced the show admirably, like he always does. George, thanks a lot. And we'll talk to you guys again from Phoenix. Join us then. Thanks.